Welcome to OIB-TAC's monthly webinars, where our presenters share valuable information and helpful resources to support professionals working with older adults who are blind or vision impaired. Let's check out this month's webinar.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Get Smart, Accessibility in the Home. My name is Stephanie Welch-Grenier. I am a certified vision rehabilitation therapist, certified orientation and mobility specialist, and teacher of the visually impaired. I am also the newest member to the OIB-TAC team, working as an older blind specialist. I have worked in this field as a direct service provider for right at 12 years now in January of 2025. I have worked across a variety of settings with all ages, from school districts to preschool programs, all the way through older adult, older blind programming. During my time as a direct service provider, I often find that when I go in to do an assessment with an adult, the family members often ask for smart home solutions. With the use of smartphones now and the easy ability to ask Siri to do something for us or ask Alexa to do something for us, many family members have the preconception that a smart device will fix all of their family members' worries and needs in the home. With a simple voice command or a tap of a button, they often believe that their older adult family member will have no more accessibility issues if we can just find the right smart solution or smart device for them. Today, through this presentation, we will be looking at some of what is on the market and what is typically used in a home setting by our adult clients, as well as discussing the pros and cons of adding a smart device or a smart home solution. Before I jump into the appliances and smart home solutions, I want to share some of the typical conversation starters that I get when the topic of smart appliances is brought up during the assessment process. Can't you just tell the microwave to cook? Is there a voice-activated appliance that can help my family member do the laundry? Use the microwave. Turn on the coffee pot? My friend has this thing that looks kind of like a cylinder. She calls it Alexa, and she can tell it to do just about anything, and it does it for her. Can I get one of those? My mother's birthday is coming up. What easy smart gadget can I get for her? Before we jump into the devices that are available on the market, we want to talk about how to control these devices. There are multiple methods for controlling smart home devices and appliances, and these methods can range from a smartphone application to a smart speaker. The point of access depends on what you're trying to do, but most smart appliances are not going to just function on their own as a smart appliance without some kind of access point. So on this slide, we will start with the first main access point that is seen in the field and used most commonly, the Amazon Alexa or Amazon Echo speakers. These are very, very popular, easy to get, fairly affordable, and always upgrading and keeping up with what's happening. We see Alexa speakers and Amazon Echoes in homes all the time of family members. So a lot of times family members will think that this is a great option for their family member that is an older adult. The nice thing about the Amazon Alexa Echo speaker systems is that you can ask them for the time, you can set a timer, you can set an alarm. You can do calling if it is paired with a smartphone. You can have calendar access, scheduling, and reminders set by voice. You can look up information, weather, sports, stats, news. A lot of people really enjoy this feature. You can listen to music, books, podcasts, etc. You can control some appliances and some home functions. And the best feature that Alexa has is the Alexa Show and Tell. This feature is very commonly asked for because the show and tell function will read a label to you. So we have a lot of family members that want this in the home for their older adult, typically in the kitchen, because I can ask Alexa, Alexa, tell me what I'm holding, and she will read the label for me. So I have all the guesswork out of the labeling system if I can line up my can or line up my spice with the camera well enough to get Alexa to read the label for me. A lot of people really like this because then I don't have to potentially go through the whole process of labeling stuff in my kitchen, which can be very time consuming. Next up is the Google Speaker or Google Nest Hub system. Google speakers are not seen in homes as often, but it does have a lot of the same functions as an Alexa. So you can ask for time, weather, information like that. The Google speakers are also set up to your Wi-Fi, so it has all of that capability to access information from the web. The Google Nest Hub speakers and the system connect to a variety of appliances, including thermostats, smoke and CO2 alarms, door locks, light bulbs, and more. Again, these are just not seen as often, although you do occasionally find a Google speaker in a home. And last but not least is the Apple HomeKit system. Devices that function with the Apple HomeKit can be controlled by an app on your iPhone, your iPad, and even with voice command through Siri. Apple offers products that will work with their HomeKit that are smart door locks, smart light switches and smart plugs, smart light bulbs, and even some home appliance functions. In the 12 years that I have been a direct service provider, I have never actually seen an Apple HomeKit used in a home. Typically, when doing an assessment, I try to stick with what the family is most comfortable with or familiar with to help shorten that learning curve for everybody involved. And so typically you're going to see an Amazon Alexa speaker way before you ever see something that is connecting to an Apple HomeKit. I have never personally seen one used by any family. Doesn't mean you couldn't do it. Now let's jump into the actual appliances that are out there. Always first on the list is thermostats. Thermostats are one of the hardest things for my clients with low vision to see. As adults start to lose vision later in life, they always complain to me about the thermostat, usually for a number of reasons. If it's an old dial, everything on there is too small to read. If it has a screen with an electronic digital display, most of the time it's too light or too small. Even if it has some backlighting, a lot of times the contrast is so poor, the individual cannot use the thermostat by themselves. So a smart thermostat is often what I'm asked about. On this slide, I put a couple options. These are some of the main ones that you will see. There is the iDevice thermostat, the ecobee smart thermostats, and then of course Honeywell carries a variety of smart thermostats. I have two listed that you see most commonly on this slide. The smart thermostats are nice because they can be controlled from an app on the phone. And so somebody else can even control that thermostat for a family member. I have seen that happen where maybe the parent or the adult didn't have the tech skills or even own a smartphone to control the thermostat, but their son or other family member did, and they could easily change the thermostat temperature for that family member from anywhere. That's an option, and it's definitely one that families will take advantage of in this situation. Most of these thermostats require not just a smartphone, but also some kind of a subscription to an app. And so that is also something to take into consideration. Can the individual navigate the app? Next up is the television. A lot of us don't even use the television all day to watch TV. We are listening to the television while we cook, while we clean, while we do crafts. The television running in the background is something that a lot of us have in our homes and a lot of us grew up with. For our adults who are home a good portion of the day, especially if they're retired, the television is frequently on throughout the day and they like that background noise present. Not being able to access the television, find the channel you want, locate the things that you need is a huge source of frustration for adults. And it's usually one of the first things that I get asked when I walk into a home. Can you fix the TV for me? And can you help me see the TV better? Two separate problems, but let's talk about what is out there for television options. So first and foremost is the Spectra line of televisions. Spectra can be found at places like Walmart, Target, other shopping stores that are in most of our neighborhoods and communities. They're not very expensive, and they at least offer the basics of voice guidance that will announce your channels and the source of information that you are using while you're navigating. Next up is the Sony Bravia TVs. The Android 2018s and above have built-in zoom and voice guidance accessibility features that will narrate the movement of the remote control, input made on the TV. It will let you know when you're switching between apps, and it will announce individual letters with the on-screen keyboard, which is super helpful. Vizio TVs 2017 and above also have that built-in zoom and talkback feature. Then you get into additional things like adding on an Amazon Fire Stick. The nice thing with the Amazon Fire Stick is you can do voice view, so it will read to you what is on the screen, what movie or show you're on. And then Amazon also offers quite a decent range of descriptive movies and shows and stuff. So I have a lot of adults who like the Amazon Fire Stick because not only can they hear what movies they're going through, but they can also get one with that added description while they're watching the movie. Last on the list is the Fire TV with Alexa built in. This takes a greater level of skill. You have to be able to get that all set up and functioning. It can also kind of, have some Wi-Fi issues occasionally. So it is an option out there, but it is more for somebody who has a lot more tech skills in terms of navigating that kind of a system. Now, the important thing to know about the television functions is those functions help you navigate the physical television itself. So for instance, the Spectra televisions will tell you what source input you're using on the TV and what channel you're changing on the television itself. However, if you have a client who is connected to a cable subscription, the cable subscription will not be narrated by the Spectra options because those options are only controlled within the television itself. And a cable box is an external connection. So oftentimes families don't realize this difference. However, I always tell them not to be discouraged because there are a lot of options that we can also help with when we're talking about cable. Two of the main cable companies that are out there that I typically will run into is Spectrum and Xfinity. Those are the only two I'm including today. Doesn't mean there aren't other options out there to explore. I always tell providers and family members to look at what you've got. Call your cable company and ask questions about accessibility. What do they have built in? What's out there for me? But first off, I want to start with what these two companies have, and that will give you an idea of what you can ask another company that you might be using or that might be unique to an area. So first and foremost, the newer cable boxes have guided narration. So that is your on-screen text-to-speech option, it will let you know what you're going through on the screen. So reading the channel, telling you the show, the name of the show, what time it's playing, things like that. Guided narration is built into the newer boxes. So a lot of times an individual will have an old box, and we will work with the cable company, or I'll tell the family to work with the cable company to get a new box sent out to the house. Another option out there today is the audio description. The remote will play narrated descriptions when they are available. Spectrum Access app has audio description to over 600 plus demand movies and shows. And if you're paying for the subscription and you already have it, you might as well use it. Enhanced closed captioning does help some of our clients. It will allow you to customize the appearance of the closed captioning on the screen. I would be lying if I said that I haven't played with this one myself. It is nice to be able to change that contrast to enlarge the print so you're not squinting across the room or struggling to see it and having to sit so close to the screen. There are a lot of clients who just adjusting that closed captioning allows them to have more access to what's happening in the show. And last but not least, that is often forgot about, is the large button remotes. Every company calls them something a little bit different: large button remote, big button remote, low vision remote. Regardless, it is a free remote that is provided to you by the companies as part of their accessibility feature as a paying customer. And a lot of clients don't know that it exists. And so if you call your company, or even sometimes you can drive down to a local store, they will have a large button remote for you. They can ship it out to your house. It's free. It has fewer buttons, and it's usually much easier to navigate for the client. I will say some are made better than others. Some are not as clean as others. Some have too many buttons or poor contrast, but at least it's an option. And for a client who has just started to lose vision with things like macular degeneration or cataracts, it's enough to help them navigate the remote and not feel as frustrated with the process. If you're as old as I am, you remember the good old days of controlling your lights in the home with a simple clap on, clap off. This functionality has now turned into a smart light bulb. A lot of individuals are looking to use a smart light bulb because I can tell my smart speaker or my smart control system to turn my lights on and off. And this is really nice for somebody who maybe forgot to turn on a light or wants the light on when they get into a space or when they're walking towards a space. They can simply say something like, "Alexa, turn on the kitchen light," and she will. Smart bulbs have to be paired with your smart device, and usually through an app as well. So the bulb itself connects to the app that controls the bulb, and then that app has to be paired with your Alexa system. So it's a multi-step process to connect smart light bulbs in most situations. It is important that somebody understands that it is not as simple as screwing in the smart light bulb, plug and play, you're ready to go. You have to be able to connect that system and manage the connection to multiple light bulbs through the apps and through that device itself that is controlling the app, whether it's Alexa or a Google Nest system. Putting your key in the door to open your front door or your back door can start to become a little bit cumbersome for somebody who is losing some vision, because depth perception can sometimes be off, maybe contrast isn't great, or even lighting. If I'm coming in later in the day and it's a little bit of a dim setting, I can't always tell where that is, and I'm trying to see the lock opening, but I can't. So for some individuals, a smart door lock is an option that they consider. A smart door lock has to be installed onto the door. The app has to be set up, but there are a lot of options with a smart door lock that individuals like and that family members like. One, you can open it with a fingerprint. Two, you can open the door with a number code or a passcode. You can unlock and lock the door with a smartphone app, with voice control, with your smartwatch, and even with a Bluetooth key fob. However, all of these things require setup, maintenance, and control. So somebody has to be able to set all of this up and make sure that the door locks are functioning properly with the app that is using or that is allowing that door lock to function in the home. Next up are smart batteries and smart listeners. When the smart batteries first came out, I got a bunch of questions about them. Individuals thought that I could just take that smart battery and I could put it into any device that used a battery, and Shazam, now it's a smart device. The batteries do not give you as much functionality as individuals thought. The smart batteries, the Roost smart batteries, are made for things like smoke alarms and CO2 alarms. It connects that device to the Wi-Fi, and the battery itself will communicate with your smartphone, either an Android or an iPhone. It will let you know when that alarm is going off. The alarm can be stopped with your smart device, and the authorities can then be contacted. You can have more than one contact listed for notification, and the battery will also notify you when it's low and it needs to be changed. With the batteries themselves, one of the biggest complaints is that they are a little bit difficult to set up, to get connected to the Wi-Fi, to get all of that pairing down. And then they do not allow you to snooze a hardwired system. So a lot of smoke alarms are hardwired into a house, into the electrical system. Those ones themselves cannot be snoozed. Next up is the smart listener. The mid-link smart listener, or smart alarm, forgive me, is the main one that you will see out there. It will turn on supported home appliances, just that on and off function. So things like lights and cameras. Does work with both the Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa, but it only gives you that on and off function. Next up are the smart plugs. Much like the smart batteries, when the smart plugs came out, individuals thought you could plug any appliance into a smart plug, and Shazam, you all of a sudden have a smart appliance. However, it doesn't really work that way. The smart plugs help you turn on and off an appliance. That's about it. It gives you at least that functionality for on and off, so I could maybe start my coffee in the morning if I wanted to. But I can't change the settings on the coffee maker. A lot of coffee makers already have programmable time starts, so you don't necessarily need a smart plug to use that kind of a function. However, there are a few smart plugs out there, and individuals do like to have them when it is something that they would like to have that on and off function for. The Wemo Mini Smart Plug is one of the first ones that you'll find. TP-Link Casa Smart, the Amazon Smart Plug, iDevice switches that connect with Wi-Fi. They are both smart plugs and wall outlets. The nice thing about the smart plugs now is there is a little more diversity in what you can use with the individual smart plugs. They used to be a little bit more specific, so Amazon had to be with Amazon or Alexa items. The iDevices now and the Wemo, you can use any of the access points. So your Alexa, your Google Assistant, Apple HomeKit, stuff like that. That's really nice that there's a little bit more diversity in them. You don't have to be as careful when you buy them in making sure that you have the right access point, but it is always something I tell family members to check. Please make sure that the smart plugs and smart outlets you're purchasing will work with your Alexa speaker or with your Google Assistant or your Apple HomeKit, whatever system you're trying to function with. Now let's jump into some of our larger appliances. This topic has definitely changed over the course of the last 5 to 6 years. Appliances that are now controllable with some kind of a smart device system have grown exponentially. When I first started talking about this topic, there was no diversity in this area as well. You had appliances that could only be controlled by one system or another, and there wasn't a lot of crossover. Today, we will look at a laundry list of appliances and companies you can use generally both your Alexa and Google Assistant, either or. Right now, they have refrigerators, dishwashers, wall ovens, ranges, washers, dryers, air conditioners, water heaters, ventilation systems, coffee pots and espresso machines, water softeners, cooktops, air purifiers, microwaves, and robot vacuums, all of which can be controlled with some kind of a smart system, smart device. The companies that allow these options are Bosch, Frigidaire, and GE. GE is a little bit different in the fact that some of the functions are only alert functions, so not necessarily control of the appliance itself, but getting alerts about what that appliance is doing. So for instance, maybe my air conditioner needs a filter change. It will alert me to that. Maybe I can't control the system itself, but it will let me know the air purifier needs a change of a filter. Continuing with the list of companies, LG, Genair, Kenmore, Samsung, and Whirlpool all have options for smart appliances. The most important thing to know is that depending on the appliance purchased, depends on the functionality. So for instance, LG has some appliances that work with either Google Assistant or Alexa, so there's not as much diversity in their company. And again, things like appliances within Genair can only give you alerts. So it is important to really read up on the appliance that the family member is considering. And it's important to consider, does this work with my home system? Last but not least, this is not a smart appliance, but I included it here because these markings were all the rage when they came out. And those are the Halo home appliance overlay and labeling systems. The reason these markings were popular is because the marking itself, much like a bump dot, matches some of the symbols that are on the appliance dial or appliance button. So a plus is a plus, a minus or a dash is a dash, and so forth. Although these Halo appliance markings are kind of fun and funky, they could work very well for somebody with low vision. They're not always distinguishable or easy to tell apart for somebody who has light perception or no light perception that is really still in the beginning stages of trying to tell things apart. The symbols may not necessarily be meaningful to the individual. So spending money on the Halo is not really going to be all that beneficial compared to just placing a regular bump dot for that client on the device itself or on the appliance button, because either way it's a raised tactile form and that's really what they need. They don't necessarily need the individualized shape. And so these are great, but again, you have to consider functionality for the individual before using something like this. Now, if you really want to get fancy, there are two companies that have specifically designed appliances with individuals who have vision loss in mind. First up is the GE Artistry electric ranges with Braille overlay. These are offered in both black or white to match your kitchen style and setup. The Braille overlay was designed through input from the Kentucky School for the Blind to make sure that the Braille input or the Braille overlays actually worked functionally for an individual with vision loss. Next up is the Samsung top load super speed washer and gas dryer set. These offer audio assistance, and by audio assistance, that means different sounds for different selections. So the individual would have to be able to tell those sounds apart for the selection that they want. And then they also offer Braille next to the key control panel buttons. The washer and dryer also connect with the SmartThings app for cycle alerts, scheduling, remote starts and stops. These are a little bit more pricey, but they are on the market and individuals definitely will take advantage of them. I have never actually seen anybody in the older adult population purchase and use one of these. However, I have seen them in some younger vocational rehabilitation client homes, and people do occasionally like them and have them and use them. They just are a little bit more on the pricey side. Now that we have learned that you can purchase nearly every large and small appliance in your home with some type of smart functionality or smart feature, if you're willing to spend the money on it, let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons and really looking at that assessment piece with an adult who is wanting to incorporate smart devices and smart appliances in the home. First and foremost, it is important to know what your older adult programming offers. So my first rule of thumb is I don't ever talk with somebody about a smart option that is not in some way funded or affordable for that individual. And so if the individual brings it to my attention and wants to talk about it specifically and is willing to buy it for themselves, I am happy to have that conversation. However, if I go into a home in a situation where I know that I am not going to get funding for that through the state OIB programming or through any other means, and the individual also doesn't potentially have the income to support the use of that appliance, either through the purchase of a smartphone or the smart access point, it is not something that we're going to look at or worry about. The last thing that you want to do, the last thing that I would ever want to do, is to encourage somebody to spend money on or purchase something that is not necessarily reasonable or in their budget. So budgetary needs is always the first consideration. Do we even have a means to purchase and to keep this item up and running? Next up is, what does it take for me to manage this? What kind of tools and what apps do I have to be able to navigate? Are these apps manageable? Do I have the tech skills to be able to navigate these apps? Is the application accessible? If the individual is using something like VoiceOver to navigate their smartphone, not every application is going to necessarily be accessible. Do I know the precise commands and gestures needed to navigate my smart device, whether it's a phone or a tablet, an iPad, whatever the person is using to navigate the apps? Can I navigate those myself to be able to troubleshoot if something goes wrong or if I lose connection? Another cost consideration is, what is the cost to install the item? So one thing that always is an issue for thermostats is it has to be installed and it needs to be installed properly. It also has to work with the system within the home. So if the person has some kind of a heating system that isn't compatible with the thermostat, it may not be an option, and you have to have somebody who can properly install that thermostat to know the difference. The other thing to consider is some state OIB programming will not cover the cost of the installation. So the individual also has to cover that cost. It's important to know if that cost is reasonable or not. Last but not least on cost is, do I really need a smart device for that? Or will a simple bump dot do the trick? Often a tactile marking is just as good as telling Alexa to microwave my dinner for 3 minutes. If I can find the 3-minute button on my microwave with a simple tactile marking, It's foolproof and easy, and I didn't waste a bunch of money on a smart microwave. Last but not least in this area is the Wi-Fi connectivity. Do I have the connectivity to run all of these devices in my home? Can I have all of my smart appliances running and my smart light bulbs and my smart devices without completely saturating my network and causing issues with my connectivity in general? A home can only have so many things going all at once, and depending on the strength of the Wi-Fi in the home, the individual might lose connectivity pretty frequently. Now, before I jump into the last few considerations, one of the other first considerations that I always look at is, does this individual even know how to or have access to a smart device? A lot of homes that I go into, the family member is using an old flip phone. They have never used a smartphone in any capacity. So the learning that they would need to do to be able to manage these devices is a fair amount. Doesn't mean that they can't, doesn't mean that we can't address it and they're not going to be able to learn it, but you have to start with, do you even own an iPhone or a smart device? And if you don't, we need to start there. We need to start with getting that smart device, learning how to use it for basic navigation, and then get into things like using an app, connecting things with an app, connecting smart appliances. So it's important to take that into consideration first. A lot of times family members want so desperately for their older adult loved one in their life to have smart appliances, not realizing that the individual doesn't even have a smartphone and doesn't even have an access point for these devices. On that note, it is important that once we get to the point of maybe purchasing an appliance or considering an appliance, you have to ensure that all of your appliances work with the home management device you have. And it is always best to stick to one home smart hub and coordinate your devices and your appliances appropriately. So if I'm going to stick with General Electric, I'm going to stick with GE and only try to purchase GE as much as possible. It's going to limit the number of apps that I have to navigate as a user instead of having 10 different types of appliances with 10 different types of apps that I have to pair with my Alexa app and try to get all of it synced together. That creates a general level of chaos that would drive anybody crazy. So sticking to one type is always best. An issue that people will have as well is dropped connectivity. If it drops, can you reconnect? So if my microwave stops functioning and I lose that Wi-Fi connectivity to activate my microwave with Alexa, can I troubleshoot that and reconnect it? The Wi-Fi doesn't always just automatically come back up and reconnect to that appliance. So if that is the only way that I have learned how to use my microwave is through Alexa voice command, I will now have no way to heat my food because I wasn't given a low cost, easier solution for using my microwave. It is important to make sure that that individual can use that connection and reset that connection should that Wi-Fi go down. In my heart of hearts, less is more. I would much rather teach somebody how to use a bump dot than put them in this kind of a situation. I typically will recommend that we also mark the appliance and we make it accessible no matter what is happening, because if that Wi-Fi goes down and they cannot reconnect, that appliance is essentially no good. The other thing to consider when spending money on a smart device is limited functionality. The smart devices don't do everything. They're not going to fly you to the moon and back. It's important to know that you're spending money on something that only does a handful of functions. And are those functions really what I need? And are they really worth the cost? One thing that I've run into a lot is assisted living facilities or some kind of a community setting where the Wi-Fi is a part of the facility itself. This can be difficult and a little bit tricky to navigate because each room individually doesn't always have its own Wi-Fi connectivity. So working with that company, with the building, with the IT people inside of that assisted living has to take place to be able to connect that individual. It can be a little bit tricky and cumbersome. Can be done, but you have to take that into consideration, is the connectivity when you're in a building that is sharing a Wi-Fi. Another thing to consider with things like thermostats is an individual might live in an assisted living or an apartment complex or some kind of community setting where you are not allowed to change the thermostat. So although they might want to pay for their own smart thermostat, the building maintenance itself will not allow a change in the thermostat. So that is really important to know and to coordinate appropriately. If it's not allowed, then you have to have other options. There are a couple other considerations. Security. Putting things on Wi-Fi does allow some input, security risks where people can get into the system. Sometimes in community settings, they do not want things on Wi-Fi. You're not allowed to put a smart speaker or something like that on the Wi-Fi. And it is important to know the rules for that community and for that shared Wi-Fi before looking at a device like that. Batteries can also drain quickly. So one complaint about the smart batteries is that they drain very quickly and they have to be replaced frequently. Somebody who is on a fixed income may not want to replace smart batteries all the time. And remember, every time I replace it, I have to start the connection process back over. So can that person maintain that process? Taking that battery out, changing it, and reconnecting every time they have to be replaced, especially if they drain quickly. In closing, I am providing a list of commonly used items on the market, both companies and specific items that you can research on your own and check out. I definitely don't have preferences for items or specific items that I look at. I let a client always lead the conversation, tell me what they need, and let me know what they're already thinking about before we jump into some kind of a conversation about smart access and smart home solutions. However, it is a legitimate conversation that as a direct service provider, we can no longer try to avoid. Smart options have become more and more prevalent. Family members are wanting to know how to make things easy and accessible in the home. It is important to stay well versed on what's out there and how it actually works. With that being said, I always encourage myself and anyone else considering a smart option to really do your due diligence and to research the item first. Make sure that it's compatible with everything else that you're running in a home. And most importantly, make sure that it is truly accessible, that the applications that are running it are accessible, that it is a reasonable price point for the client, and that it's something that they're actually going to use. Sometimes going smart is not always the smartest solution. A low cost, low tech option often serves us better. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning about when to be smart and when to go low cost and low tech.
This has been OIB-TAC's monthly webinar. Thanks for tuning in. Find recordings of our past webinars on our YouTube channel and discover all of our many resources at oib-tac.org. That's oib-tac.org. Like us on social media and share our resources with your colleagues and friends. Until next time.